It is my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's panel discussion, which is part 2 of the Joubilee for Journalists and Media Practitioners. The Diocese of Roseville this year joins the Church Universal in observing the Jubilee year 2025, and the Joubilee for Journalists is one of the activities on the calendar of activities.
We believe this is a significant moment to discuss the contribution media practitioners and their organizations make in bringing hope to our society and shaping the faith in our communities through various forms of media. The late Pope Francis, in his Communications Day message earlier this year, urged Catholic communicators to become communicators of hope, to focus on sharing stories of goodness and resilience while countering the often negative focus of mainstream journalism. This evening, hopefully, we'll examine how, through journalism, we can build a culture of hope, helping our communities and the world be less deaf to the cries of the poor and be less indifferent. But what are the hindrances to using communication to inspire hope and mutual understanding? Or is it the role of the journalist? Are the responsibilities of the journalist changing? How is the changing society and the various factors, such as evolving cultural norms, shaping the journalist, and as such impacting how and what he or she reports? Could this call to be communicators of hope dull the enthusiasm and drive of journalists? How can this call be answered in a responsible way, while the journalist remains the watchdog for society? Hopefully, we can have a healthy and meaningful discussion on some of these issues and others in tonight's panel discussion. Thank you for coming. Again, welcome to everyone.
Thank you very much, Nazarene, for introducing us to this evening's proceedings. I would like to call at this time on Father Nigel Karam, who is the chairperson of the 2025 Jubilee Committee in the Diocese of Roseville.
So please allow me to share some opening remarks with you. Back in January, our deceased Pope Francis hosted the Jubilee for the World of Communications in Rome, and approximately 10,000 pilgrims came from 138 countries, attended Mass for the Jubilee of Media Workers on that Sunday together with a massive crowd in St. Peter's Square. The event, which took place between January 24th to the 26th, celebrated the work of those who share the good news of Christ through communications and media. The pilgrims came from all over the world. Over that weekend, he also met specifically with the pilgrims and shared some spontaneous remarks. In fact, Pope Francis was called an excellent communicator. In fact, he had a 9-page document prepared to read, but reading the room and knowing all what had happened before, he sensed that people were maybe a little bit hungry, and so he just gave a few remarks very spontaneously, leaving behind the 9-page document for them to read later. But first of all, in those spontaneous remarks, he thanked the media workers, the journalists, all those involved in photography, photojournalism, videography, and so on, for their work, and pinpointed how important it is in our world today. The then Pope noted that communication is a movement out of oneself to meet and share with the other a part of myself. He continued that communications should be a true encounter, one with the other, and to do this well takes great wisdom. Moreover, the work of communication is meant to build the society, to build the church, to help move our communities forward. This is only possible, according to the late Pope, if journalists and all media workers recognize that there is an unwritten pact of truth-telling between them and those who consume their work. The pact itself is not only about the written or visual truth, but ultimately about the truth that resides in ourselves. Indeed, this is a great challenge in our day, where many are hooked on sound bites and slogans, forward fake news without thinking, or peddle what is popular to get more followers instead of getting to the heart of the matter. Pope Francis underlined that communication is a divine work, as God communicates himself in his Son Jesus Christ, the Word made flesh, by the power of the Holy Spirit, who himself animated the first Christian communities, moving them to proclaim and transmit the gospel, the faith, to many, many generations. This year, the theme for World Day of Communications is "Share with gentleness the hope that is in your heart." And tonight, we are here together to listen to this panel share about the personal and collective responsibility that they have to be communicators of hope in 2025 here in Dominica. Let me give you, or share with you rather, a personal experience that I had. I recently had 2 funerals for young men who were gunned down, one in Guadeloupe and one on the block next to the Roseau River. Honestly, I did not know what to say, but at the end, I tried to communicate from my heart the hope that many of them would find salvation in Jesus from the disappointment, despair, and death hardening their hearts. I challenge those who were listening not to pin their hope in a high life, high-octane bikes, high-price chains, or the high leaf. I truly hope that, and communicated that we would stop the willful destruction of young men, and that they would end the spiral of violence, murder, and revenge. I said that I truly hope and pray that we would find peace and have opportunities to build lives, have families, and grow old. Finally, I'd like to thank those who have put this panel together, and thank all those who are making it a reality by participating in one way or the other. My gratitude goes to the panelists for your contributions and the continued work that you do, and to all of you who are here to listen, whether in person or via or online. I trust that what we do here this evening may continue to grow and become a fruitful engagement between the media, the church, and with our society at large. God bless you all.
Thank you, Father Karam, for those words. I now invite Ms. Nazarene Gordon to come forward to introduce our panelists.
This evening, we were scheduled to have 4 members of our panel. Our thoughts are with Father Chaplis, who is unable to join us, and Mr. Dennis Joseph. Our panelists are Mr. Matthias Pelletier and Mr. Tim Durand. And I'll first introduce Mr. Durand. Mr. Tim Durand has worked in the media for a significant number of years. He's held positions of Program Director of DBS Radio, Public Grower Relations Manager, Dominica Banana Marketing Corporation, News Editor, Marpin Telecoms and Broadcasting, and subsequently Marpin 2K4 Limited, among others. Mr. Durand is currently the owner and managing director of Dominica News Online, an online newspaper. Welcome, Mr. Jura.
Thank you.
Mr. Matthias Peltier Jr. Mr. Matthias Peltier has been a media professional for more than 30 years. He's been trained both in television and radio broadcasting. Mr. Peltier worked as a correspondent for Radio Antilles, Voice of America, and the BBC Caribbean Report, Cana News. In Dominica, he held the positions of news editor and program director at Voice of the Islands, which was a Catholic radio station here in Dominica. Mr. Peltier also worked as manager of Kyrie FM radio, news editor, Marpin Telecoms and Broadcasting, editor of the Tropical Star newspaper, and managing director of Times newspaper. He later transitioned into talk radio, producing the popular Hang in its early days, and now the most talked about talk show, The Hot Seat, and The Top on the Block. Over the years, Matthias Peltier has undergone training in various aspects of communication and media locally, regionally, and internationally. I welcome Mr. Peltier. My name is Nazarene Gordon. I'm your moderator. And to start things off this evening, we will invite each member of the panel to give some opening remarks. We begin with Mr. Durand. Mr. Tim Durand, as a media owner, someone who has managed both news and programming, who now has to be concerned about the bottom line, keep people's interest and compete with other entities, how do you see the role of the journalist as a communicator of hope? I invite you to give your opening comments.
Well, thank you, Ms. Gordon, and thank you for inviting me here in the first place. And I would like to also welcome the people who are listening or watching, via social media and the various live streams. In fact, there is one live stream I know of, and that is on Dominica News Online on our YouTube channel. So I'm hoping that people are tuning in, logging in to watch it. And so we want to welcome you. How do I see, the role of the journalist, as a communicator of hope, as one who inspires hope? And how does that, apply to the experience that I've had in various, places that I've worked and the various contributions that I've made to media in Dominica? I think at this stage, we must begin, well, I want to begin my presentation by asserting that the journalist has to first and foremost recognize his or her role as that of presenting the truth. And whatever transpires from that, however it develops, into, various aspects of journalism, it must be the bedrock of whatever a journalist does. But I think critical to the issue of hope is that there has to be a certain amount of objectivity and a certain amount of compassion, if you will, that has to be brought to play when a journalist is doing his or her work. And so even if the role of the journalist is primarily to report the truth as accurately and objectively as he or she possibly can, he must also consider that there is a need, and there may be a need from time to time to provide stories, to report on stories, to provide information that will instill hope, that will uplift people, and that will address situations that have the potential to affect the lives of people in a negative way. And so in my role, as a media practitioner over the years, I have tried to balance the need for reporting the truth with the responsibility of ensuring that there is that balance entails stories that will uplift people, that will bring hope to people. For example, I mean, you could be reporting, say, and I want to use a Dominican situation where it may be necessary to report on, say, the negatives that exist in society that one can identify with regard to the work of politicians, for example. The fact that in some cases there may be policies and programs that we do not think are beneficial to the country, or there may be behavioral patterns of politicians that we think perhaps are not in keeping with how the average individual should behave. But and we need to report those things. We need to report inconsistencies. We need to report behavior that is not in keeping with perhaps what we as a society have come to accept as moral behavior. But on the other hand, while it is necessary to report that, we must also temper that with accurate reporting on the positive things that these very same politicians may be doing. And so this is where sometimes the journalist gets to the point where he has or she has to be mindful of not being allowed, not allowing him or herself to be drawn into a particular position or particular alignment that could influence what he or she presents, and be mindful of the fact that there's need to present all sides of a story, to present the parts of the experiences that can be uplifting and hopeful to people. So I think it is a kind of line that is, we find it difficult for journalists to maintain, because there are so many influences, that seek to affect what goes on in the media, and it can be difficult for any particular journalist at a certain point in time to make the kind of decision that is not only in the interest of any particular party or interest, but in the general interest of the country. And so this is one of the things, I think, one of the challenges that I think that our journalists face in the country. With regard, for example, to the faith-based journalism, for example, there is the need for that, absolute need for that we need to be able to let our faith influence the way we report. I mean, one of the pillars, right, of reporting, accurate reporting, or how should I put it? Two of the pillars of effective reporting would have to be the need to recognize honesty, or or at all times try to portray honesty and integrity in what you report, or try to focus on those two things. But also, so this means that if you belong to a particular organization that represents a particular interest, it is obvious that you will want to portray that, to have that reported, to have that reflected in what you report. But on the other hand, in the case of a journalist who is faith-based, it means that you also have to be responsible enough to recognize that when the organization for which you work errs or does something that is not in keeping with the national interest, or does something that is wrong and needs to be reported, that you have to have the courage, and you have to be able to exercise a sense of responsibility that causes you as a journalist, whose main objective, whose main role is to report the truth, to report on those issues. So we are faced with those challenges and many others, but I'm pretty sure as the discussion continues, we can explore some of the other areas that we need to consider as journalists in trying to report and trying to ensure that hope forms part of the agenda that we push forward.
Thank you, Mr. Tim Durant. Matthias Pelty, we've always known the media to be the people's eyes and ears, the watchdog for society. With the ever-changing events in our communities and the world, how do you see what you do as a talk show host, keeping the seat hot while being a communicator of hope? What is the personal and collective responsibility of journalists like yourself? I invite you to give your opening comments.
Good night to the panel. Nazarene, it's a very cool job and a very rewarding job, but there are a lot of questions as we speak. Team basically set the foundation as it relates to truth, but with truth, and we're talking about tonight, we addressing the issue of the church. I want to, of course, stress on church. With church, I'm somewhat disappointed, and I want to hit the ground running. Yes, your theme tonight is journalists as communicators of hope, a collective and personal responsibility. But what's the responsibility of the church? If the journalists can't communicate with the persons in charge, the leaders of the church, and I find it very difficult many times, I just want to hit around, to find the leaders of the church to speak to social issues affecting Dominica. It's like you're chasing something that doesn't make any sense. You want hope, but we need the leaders to give us hope. Where are the leaders? Where are the leaders? Why don't they speak out when we see all the social injustices surfacing in Dominica? I'm sure Father Karam is here. Sometimes we can get one or two priests speaking under their tongue. Like they don't necessarily want to say the truth because they're afraid of hurting somebody's feeling. But if we have to communicate, if we have to make the truth as real as possible, we need the leaders of the church to speak on the various subjects affecting us in, of course, society. There's no, I mean, Father Karam or any one of them, there's no defense, and maybe you can provide one, to say the church has been very silent. So where is the hope that we're talking about? Where is the hope that you want to talk about, Nazarene, tonight, when the leaders of the church are very silent on social issues? That's how I'm going to start the talk tonight.
Thank you, Matthias Pelty. Going to ask Mr. Durant, or Father Karam first, would you want to come in here on that particular statement? And okay, so he refers to Mr. Durant. Mr. Durant, could you give us your comments on Matt's point of view? The church being silent.
I'm hoping Father Karam doesn't expect me to provide an answer on behalf of the church, right?
But is this the general feeling among the media fraternity?
Yes, I mean, I agree. I would agree with Matt in the sense that there's not enough of that happening. I would qualify what is said with
Take the microphone.
Yes, yeah, with my own view that there are some priests, there are some clergymen some who are aware of the need to play a role in addressing the issues from the standpoint of giving people hope. And you can only give hope in that respect if something is wrong or perceived to be wrong in society. You can only give hope if you address the issue in a very tangible way or a pretty open way, as opposed to the act abstract way in which some priests and preachers address matters. You know, you speak about it in a sort of couch, abstract manner that really doesn't get to the point. So I do agree that there's a lot of room for our priests and pastors to address certain social ills, political in some cases, and let people know, because there's a saying that something is out on the support of our religious leaders, right, to provide a sort of guidance, you know, and support when we believe that there are certain things that need to be addressed in society, and there is no support coming from those people we look up to for spiritual guidance and moral support. And so I totally agree with Matt that there is room for more of that to be happening in society.
We have certainly hit the ground running. How do you, and I will direct that question to any member of the panel, how do you see building the bridge and closing that gap between what is perceived to be the church's silence, and the communicators doing their work and bringing that hope? So how do you see a coming together and of course, bringing hope to the people that we report to and the people that the priests and pastors pastor to? How can we bridge that gap? To any member of the panel.
Good evening, everybody. No, I'm not a member of the panel. I was never supposed to be a member of the panel. Ms. Gordon indicated that the panelists are Father Herman Sharpless, Mr. Matthias Peltier, Mr. Dennis Joseph, Mr. Tim Durant. Those are the panelists, okay? Two cannot make it and two are here tonight. And my role was the prayer and some opening remarks. The topic for the evening is journalists as communicators of hope, a collective and a personal responsibility. If we want to veer a little bit into the role of the church as a communicator, the church has always played a role in communicating the gospel of Jesus Christ. It has done this for 2,000 years, and it will continue to do this until the return of the Lord. Every Sunday, on every pulpit, there is a priest who preaches, or a deacon or a lay minister who preaches the gospel, who touches on many, many different issues that are occurring in the society, in the community. There is not a silence of the church, I do think, from my perspective. The church continues to speak and speak very clearly, proclaims the gospel. The church recognizes that its membership is made up of all kinds of different sectors of society, and therefore it communicates its message in a way that will affect and touch the hearts and minds of each and every person, hopefully touch the hearts and minds of each and every person, whether they're young, whether they're middle-aged, whether they're older. And in so doing, gives that message and invites each person to take personal responsibility, or to take a collective responsibility as a community to effect the necessary changes that need to occur. It is not the role of the church to start telling people what to do in their, to make this, let me say, it's not the role of the church to make the decisions for the people. People make their decisions based on what is taught and on their consciences. And the rest is left up to God. But the church continues to speak very clearly, very openly. And if I may to say something as well on personal and collective responsibility, each journalist has a personal responsibility to take the scriptures, to take the holy scriptures, to take the teachings of the church and see how they can apply that both in their personal life and in the life of the community at large. And to listen to their priests, their pastors, their leaders, their church leaders, and see how they can inculcate the values of the gospel, the values of Jesus Christ, and help to evangelize the rest of the community, their family, the world around them. Evangelize, for example, the world of journalism. I think I'll stop there for the time. Thank you very much.
Very interesting, Father Carol. And we understand, yes.
We ask you to just take the mic, the small microphone.
We understand the responsibility of journalists, of course, to bridge that gap, if you will. But we see you, the priests in Dominica, the church leaders, as a go-between between God and, of course, every member of your church. Father, I think you and others have a responsibility to speak to the issues of the day through gospel, if you want to call it that way. Because check the numbers, Father, check the numbers and see if you agree with me that the church and its members are dwindling, and ask yourself why. Are they really understanding what is really going on in the church? Are they really understanding what's really going on in the church? Because if you talk to the young person of today, Father Karam, they would say, or most of them would say, I'm not going to church because the priest's not saying what I want to hear. I might, as you said, I might not be right, but we have a responsibility to communicate in the most simple language and not talking through tongues, Father Karen, because we as church, I worked with Catholic radio since 1989 at the Voice of the Islands Radio. I've done Catholic news. I have done many things as referred to Catholic. And I find over the years, I've seen a dramatic decrease of church members of the Catholic Church. Something is definitely wrong, Father, and we have to put this in perspective. That's my thoughts.
Okay, Matt, thank you for that contribution. What do you see is the role of the journalist in that situation? You've hinted that the young people maybe are losing hope, the numbers are dwindling, the pastors and the priests are not communicating that. But what is the role of the journalist to get the message out there to convey hope in the journalist's reporting and the programming? What is the role of the journalist in that regard?
I would say, Ms. Gordon, that we have to create a bridge between the church and journalists. The priests and the church leaders should make themselves more available. So, for example, we can say, we're talking to Father Karam this week. Let's have Father Karam speaking to the public through, of course, DNO, or Q95, or Kyrie. Let's have a conversation with people. Have them understand what's really going on. A talk with the bishop. Break it down. Let the people understand the role of the church in our society. We should have more communication between the church and journalists so we can help people understand what's our role and to provide a little more hope.
Tim Durant, what do you see the role of the journalist in bringing that hope if society doesn't think that sufficient on the social matters are coming from the pulpit?
Well, I think it's the role of the society to highlight that deficiency, as Matt has just done. That if, you see, when people are distressed, when people have issues, when people are in situations dealing with matters that they don't understand, or they perhaps feel that they're not in a position, they feel like they're powerless to address certain matters. They look to leaders to guide them. And I think it is fair to say that the church is perhaps one of the greatest sources of inspiration, strength, and courage, for the populace, for people generally. So Father Karam is right that the church does, bring the gospel to the people on a regular basis, and he's right. But my question to Father Karam would be, sometimes is doing that sufficient in dealing with specific situations in society? When Jesus Christ, for example, went to the temple and ran the traders out of the temple, he could simply have perhaps just noticed it and said nothing about it, or done nothing about it, or perhaps continued along the track of telling people about the kingdom of God, and getting ready for the kingdom of God. He'd come to bring salvation to everyone and stuck to that. But he took action with regard to the injustice that he felt at the time was being committed in the temple. So in the same way, I think while it is the duty, it is the role of the priests to proliferate the gospel, but there's need, and it happens sometimes. I did point out that it does happen sometimes, but it does not happen enough, where the priests and our religious leaders take the lead. In other words, they take the initiative. They do not necessarily have to wait for the media. That's one thing that certainly could be helpful, where if the media took the initiative and approached them, that they should respond. If something is happening that requires, there are many issues in society that require, the input, that require opinion, that require some sort of clarification and analysis from various leaders. And on many occasions, people would like to hear what the religious leaders have to say about something which they may consider to be immoral, something which is affecting the very moral fabric of society. And so they wait to hear what the priests would have to say about that. It would be one thing for the priest to stand at this pulpit and say, well, injustice is wrong, but he, in a sort of very general sense, which is what the Bible teaches, but he does not address a particular issue and say, hey, look, this is wrong, And so this is where I feel that the failing, to a certain extent, has existed. That not enough of this direct addressing, if you will, of certain issues in society that generally the populace feel, or many people feel, are wrong, that you don't hear from the priests often enough. So I do agree with Matt that it would be good if that bridge could be built, in the sense that when the media perceive wrongdoings in society, but perceive situations in society that require an input from our religious leaders, that the cooperation of those leaders would be forthcoming, and they would make themselves available to the media.
Thank you. It is believed that journalists on a whole should go out and seek stories of hope, to lessen the fears of society, to highlight issues that can get people believing in themselves and believing in society, rather than the hard core controversy and the hard issues that people are just feeling gloom and doom. Do you think that's the role of the journalist, and journalists ought to be doing more of that? Or does it soften journalism?
No, because over my 30 plus years in the media, my biggest stories, and people might say I'm a controversial political guy, I am not. I'm interested in humanity. My biggest stories came from doing hope stories with the people out there. I have the record, and nobody can dispute that, of raising the most money out there in radiothons for the sick and downtrodden. So I know when I speak, I can back it up because there's a lot of hope when we do that kind of story. So we don't need to have hard news. And again, we want to tell our leaders in the church, all we need sometimes is a little guidance as to who may need what and when. And I think we can build that bridge. I've said, I want to repeat that. We can build that bridge in making our society much stronger by doing the kind of humanitarian stories and the hope stories. If we only know, because sometimes we don't even know. If we are told from the church leaders, I want to come back to the church leaders because we're talking hope this evening, as to what may be happening. I've been approached to help, say, the cathedral in raising funds, but nobody ever got an understanding of, we're just going to build a church. Why are we giving the church so much money for?
But
we need to find out the deep reasons, because everybody is giving a different side of the story. We need hope.
But would you believe it is the responsibility of the journalist to go out and get the information?
But we need the information, Nazarene. That's not the point I'm telling you. I'm telling you, we need the information from those who lead us in society. There's no hope without leadership.
If I may, Nazarene, I do agree that the journalist has a responsibility to seek out such information. I mean, the fact that the people who may be reluctant to speak to the media, or who may be reluctant to appear to be controversial on certain issues, because we know our society is a small one, and I mean, there's a lot of perceived backlash, if you will, repercussions for taking stands that may be controversial, and so we have that in every sector of society, including the religious sector. But I do believe that journalists have a responsibility to themselves to seek out that information. I didn't come here to laud DNO, but I want to point out, based on what Matt just said, that DNO was one of the organizations that sought out Father Karam with regard to the church. We actually approached him and said, Father, we know it's been difficult to raise money for the church. It's been a long process. There's been a lot of criticism from, certain sectors of the public about, the church and the fact that it has a lot of money, and why you're coming out and asking people to give and give again. Explain to us why this is necessary. Give us the history of the church, why it is so important to ensure that it is repaired, we refurbish it, bring it back to what it used to be, so people can understand. And he was very gracious and agreed to do that. So I'm saying, similarly, if I were to approach him and say, Father, there's a controversial issue, that really people are concerned about, and we would like to hear, what your view is from a biblical, a moral perspective, that he would not say to me, boy, I don't know if I want to talk about that, because you know how it is, right? So I'm not saying read it, Father. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying these are the kinds of things that we would like to see more of happening. It's part of bridging the gap, creating that bridge between the media and the clergy and the religious.
Okay. We now know how we can bridge the gap. Crime and violence permeates society. Earlier on, Father Karam referred to the 2 funerals. We hear very often that we are losing our young men. Parenting might need some areas of brushing up. We are in a society that's indifferent. How do you see your role as journalists, collectively and individually, contributing to creating a better society to help curb crime and violence?
Let me say from the start that I think one of the fundamental problems that we're now facing with the young people is the fact that we talk down to them and we don't talk with them. I think we need to build a bigger conversation on that level. People always see you with a big stick approach, but what is going on as to, let's hear the views. I heard the Prime Minister just a couple of days ago saying, let's engage with the leaders of the rebel leaders in Haiti, because he understands that they too have a voice and they too need to tell their story. Sometimes we misunderstand them. We have a lot of young people are killing each other these days, but what do we understand about their background? What is their story? I think too many times that we talk down and we don't talk with them. I think that's the fundamental problem. Yeah.
The role of the journalist in that regard?
With regard to helping curb crime or fight crime in society, I think it needs to begin with journalists becoming informing themselves and getting the assistance, say, from the authorities, the police, to get properly informed about it. We hear about crimes in the country. We hear about shootings and stabbings on a much too frequent basis. But we also do not get statistical information when we need it, so that we pretty much the same way. And I don't want it to sound as if the journalists are being denied, any sort of assistance or cooperation. I mean, this is not the case. But in the case of the police, for example, it is difficult to, on your own initiative, to get information from the police. So that if you report a crime today, somebody has stabbed someone in such and such a community, you want to be able to provide some context, some expanded context to that killing, to get the message, if you will, some more meaning, to make it more meaningful to your audience, your viewers. So one person was killed in I don't want to call any names, but somewhere in the vicinity of Roseau. But this has happened several times, throughout the year. You want to be able to get information from the police that will support, the message that you want to put out there, to the effect that one killing is too many, or the crime rate in Dominica is increasing, and this is not good for the country. And so you want to ensure that when you put that information out there, you can support it with information, accurate information from the police that will back it up. And one of the problems we experience is we're not able to get any information from the police unless they have something to put out. And so that can make it difficult for you to provide a compelling, accurate picture of what is happening with regard to crime. Now, the point Matt made about talking to the youth, that's absolutely important. I'm not going to rehash that because he has already made the point. But it is important that journalists are also able to understand what it is that motivates people to commit crime. So we need to receive the guidance from those people in a position to do that. We need to receive the training that will help us to understand, why is a crime being committed and what causes one to commit a crime, so that we can use all of that information to put together programs in terms of reporting of our stories. In the case of DNO, we don't only do stories, we try to do programs as well. And so we need to be able to get that sort of information, get people who will be willing to come and talk to us about it, to provide information that can help deal with the issue as a social crisis, and not just reporting incidents of crime as the information is provided to us by the police, or in many cases by social media. And when that comes out on social media, we have a responsibility as well not to just run with it and put it out there without having ascertained that it did happen, and gotten some sort of context for the story. So there's work to be done, and the journalists do have their role to play. But I think it cannot, as the saying goes, one hand cannot clap. It always has to be a collaborative effort.
I just this morning I spoke to Mr. Blackmore about a situation that's now, of course, current, and I spoke to him about the importance of getting somebody in the police station that is outside, and it's not get a public relations officer that can relate more directly with the press, so they can have a better understanding. Because when a rumor starts, it blows up. So we would prefer get the information from somebody who understands policing and understands community. Because right now, the police and the media don't have the best relationship, because it's almost like a police, media banter. We need somebody that is responsible in the media to share the information going forward.
We are keeping this conversation in the context of the theme, personal and collective responsibility. Let's speak to the collective responsibility of journalists to initiate that training, initiate workshops and communication to get the information and to put it out in a way that gives the community hope and gives people a sense that all is not doom and gloom, and people are it's not just a society of crime and instilling fear. What is the collective responsibility of journalists in initiating such programs?
I was the president of the Media Workers Association for some time, and we as an association tried on many occasions to provide that training for media. But as it relates to news, read Catholic news or news from the Catholic Church, the last time I received personally some training, it was in 2003. So that's many years ago. The church, since then, you correct me if I'm wrong, have not provided an education for the media to help in the dissemination of information. So we need a lot more training. The church might say they don't have money, but I think there's a lot more education that we need, especially the younger journalists, to help disseminate that kind of information. And I have approached the Prime Minister and his press secretary to provide a little more training, because I think what is lacking in Dominica is the lack of training to provide the media, especially the younger ones. I'm almost gone. In other words, I won't be here for too long. Of course, if God gives me more life, I'll take it. But we have a responsibility to train the younger persons, and maybe the church can get involved. I mean, they may be excused, there's no money, and other organizations to provide that kind of training. I tried facilitating through some Caribbean organizations many years ago, but this has stopped. So we need to find some source to train the journalists, especially more relevant as we speak with church news, and get the information out there.
There's no doubt that our media is lacking, fraternity is lacking in training in Dominica. And it is lamentable, I think, that at this stage in our development as media, that we do not have a body representing media people on the island. Because I mean, there's so many things that are happening, and when I think about that, then the question comes to mind, well, I mean, isn't something that the media association should be taking up, For example, this issue recently during the March 19th protests, where this young lady, it was alleged, was harassed by the police. And at the time when all of the controversy and the public reaction and outcry was taking place, I was thinking, well, the Media Association really should be at the forefront of this, because my experience has been that people, newsmakers, they only consider the media when they have got something to cover. So we wanted to come and cover something. If you don't come, we're not very happy about that. Even when the media shows up, they do not take into consideration the fact that, hey, if you're inviting me to cover your function, then you should really try to accommodate me and facilitate, me to be enabling me to do my work. Yeah, you go to functions, and I'm sorry I'm sounding as if I'm complaining on behalf of the media, but so there's some things that need to be said, because we can't just give the media some sort of recognition and put the media, I don't want to say on a certain pedestal, but have certain expectations of the media only when it suits us. Something is happening and we figure that the media should be covering that, and the media should be doing a good job. But then other than that, we do not consider, I will say, you go to a function and no arrangements are made to accommodate the media. They invite you, but when you come, you may go sit somewhere and somebody comes and tells you, well, that seat is taken. It's reserved. So can you find somewhere else to sit? When I joined the Dominica Banana Marketing Corporation, I was aware of that situation in the media. I had come from radio, and I had been involved in journalism and news reporting, and my people, those whom I supervised, have those issues where they attended functions and they were not given the sort of recognition and treatment that they deserved as media people. They were just expected to come and cover the function and do a good story. So when I went to Dominica Banana Marketing Corporation, I set up the Public and Global Relations Department, and I decided I was going to make every effort to treat the media differently. So I set up accommodations. I set up a system whereby the media personnel could come and plug in their equipment. They wouldn't have to figure. I ensured, I told the people who work with me, we have to designate a special area for the media where they can sit without being interrupted, without any hassle. And I just ensured that the media, was treated with the sort of respect and the sort of deference that was required, so they could do the job that was required of them. So this is not happening. But I think ultimately what we need to do collectively, as Matt pointed out, is we need to find ways to ensure that we can come up with means of developing the media, because this is something that has not been happening. People are left on their own. They join institutions and they're left to develop by themselves. We've got a situation now where broadcasting is a free-for-all. Anybody can come into broadcasting at any time and claim to be a broadcaster with no training, nothing, doing their own styles. So we're beginning to wonder, well, whether there's still standards for broadcasting. So we need to be able to do that, come together with the help of stakeholders, the government, other people who are interested in the work that the media does. So when the media comes to you and says, look, we're doing a program that we need some assistance to be able to make it work, don't think of the media only as being necessary or useful when you need them to cover a function. To be able to do that effectively, you have to help them to grow and to develop.
Let me just add them, Nazarene, just before you go. I would encourage church, Father Karen is right here, respectfully, to try to organize some training on church in terms of how the media should cover church, because I think a lot of journalists don't even understand what their role is in covering church, because there are a lot of controversial issues, and I think we should get a better understanding of how we should cover church.
I'm hearing from the panel that the disrespect for the media that has been occurring over the years and the expectation of the media do not match. On one hand, you can't disrespect me, and on the other hand, expect me to lean towards putting things only in your favor in terms of covering, because journalism is not PR. How does the changing face of social media, the rush to get it out there, where everybody has a microphone and you have all this online sites popping up, how does it impact journalism and, of course, creating that hope? Because we know controversy sells, we know is the big story that sells, and everybody wants to get it out there. And in the lineup, in your news package, this is what would make the headline. And then you hear too many negative stories in the headline. So how do we have that understanding, wanting journalists to be, of course, hope, bringing hope and softening the outlook of people in terms of the changing face of the media?
Okay. I don't think there's much we can do to stem, I was going to use the word development, but I'm not too sure the word is right as a right word, development, but to stem the tide of social media. It is going to be there, and people have come to sort of accept social media as the perhaps the most effective means of disseminating information, right? And in terms of its timeliness. And so it has really put traditional media in a difficult situation, especially if you're a media outlet that is commercial, that is working to make money and to be able to remain in business, so that you want to ensure that you remain competitive. So from a DNO standpoint, we have recognized that it is because social media comes with its ills as well. I mean, the information comes out there very quickly and sometimes in a very timely manner, but it is not always accurate. Okay, and so we have to be very mindful and guard against this inclination to want to copy social media and get the information out there as quickly as they do, because that's the way to be competitive. It means that we are losing now what we have been has been the hallmark of our operations over the years, and that is credibility. So therefore, from our standpoint, we need to look at it is true, somebody gets killed in some part of the country, the story comes up maybe a few minutes afterwards, stabbing in Grand Bay, more details later. You may never get those details, but the stabbing in Grand Bay starts up a storm of reaction and controversy, and people start to comment and judge and become the judge, jury, executioner in the matter. All sorts of negative comments, right? It is still the role of the traditional media to ensure that the story is verified. So that I always tell my people, look, we cannot go with any story that breaks on social media unless we can get this verified by at least another source, if not the police. And here's the police come in. What I said a short while ago. You get the information and you contact the police, to find out whether they can verify it or confirm it. They don't have the information, and you have to wait, for maybe they never get back to you. In some cases they do. So it means that it puts an extra burden on us to do our own verification, to get our own sources. But the bottom line is, if you want to remain, credible, you cannot afford to go the route of the social media. You can use social media to get tips, so that something breaks on social media and it sounds as if like it's newsworthy. So you use that information and pursue a expanded, a developed story that can bring your readers and your viewers more information on the incident. But if we want to remain credible and we want to remain trustworthy, we have to come up with a different way of dealing with the news stories rather than trying to copy social media.
My only comment on this is my role in the newsroom. It's not about getting it first. It's about getting it right. That's it.
Okay. Very healthy discussion. We now invite questions or comments from members of the media. If any members of the audience, any member of the audience would like to pose any question to any member of the panel or any comment, I will come around with the microphone. Is that okay, Mr. Cameraman? Yes, okay.
All right, a very interesting discussion. I mean, Matt, first of all, I hope you appreciate the fact that the church helped you right from the start at Dominica Catholic Radio when we were Voice of the Islands. Sorry, when we were there together, right way back when, and I can recall we working together at the radio station then, and that I guess helped formed you to where you are today. I want to comment first on the church and often not disseminating or the relationship with the journalists in getting information. And when that point came up, my mind went on a bit outside in regards to the bishops of the AEC. The bishops of the AEC, whenever they meet, they issue statements on different matters. I know for a fact, a few years ago, a statement was issued on crime and violence. And Bishop Miles Zervin took up the matter of crime and violence in the Dominican society and went even far as forming an alliance with members of the other faiths. And I was part of that and issued statements. I can recall Bishop Miles issuing a statement on the matter of crime and violence. And also, I know for a fact too that the Justice and Peace Commission, of which I was part of, took up as part of its terms of reference to give the bishop guidance in issuing statements on issues of the state. And that brings the point as to how the information is disseminated. Does a journalist just call a priest to speak to an issue? I'm not too sure whether there's a protocol in the diocese in that regard. But from what I know, the bishop is the one who used to speak on issues. So that is a matter perhaps for the diocese to look at closely as to who speak on issues. Because one may say, can I just pick up a phone and call any priest to react to some matter in the society? I think that there must be clarity. There should be clarity to this as to, but from what I know, the bishop is the one in the past who used to speak to issues. As to whether that is done regularly enough is another matter. Father made reference to the meeting with Pope Francis when he met with the journalists, the Jubilee of the journalists. And I would just want to quote briefly something he said, which is very pointed, and it irked something in me. He said, "Your work is a work that builds." A work that builds. It builds the society. It builds the church. It makes everyone go forward, provided it is true. Provided it is true. And he goes on to say, you are truth. You are true. And the Pope went on, and I like this part where he says, but you inwardly in your life, are you true? And I raise this because I think the Pope was saying in a subtle way there that yes, it's important to share the information, but what about your own spiritual life? I think similarly he was pointing to this there in making this point. So I don't want it to, but I mean we spoke a lot about it builds the church. Can more be done in building the church in the role of the journalists? And I heard a lot of points were made. Yes, we try to get information, but can we take now and then in the print journalism to do a feature on different aspects of the life? Has consideration be given to doing a feature on the role of the diocese in the year of Jubilee? What are the programs? What are the activities? Can the print or has the print media researched that and to pull out a story there? Has a panel been formed to come to discuss those issues? So I'm saying that that part of building the church, have we done enough? Or I guess it's an ongoing thing, but I think this is important. Another
Let's
yes.
give them a chance to comment on that.
Martin, thank you. Because we go back a long, long way. That's when you were younger, right?
Yeah.
I get the point, Martin. I think I want to invite church. I listed a few points that maybe the Dominican our priests, our leadership in church can look at. We need to have a conversation with Father Karam, who's head of the church. I'm just using him as an example, not directly talking to him, to answer a few issues as it relates to church. For example, the church and its ability in keeping younger people engaged. Where can we get more Catholic education? Dismissing, if you will, a lot of rumors out there that there is sexual abuse in the church and dismissing the sexual scandals. We need a perspective on that. Also, women in church and women playing more active roles in church today. So these are some of the issues that we can discuss with church, and we can get a better understanding going forward.
And I guess the methodology in which you can do that can be examined. Yeah. I think it is important. But one last point was on the point of the training of journalists. I think that is so important. And you mentioned how can the church play a part in helping journalists to report on matters of church. I think that is very important. And also was mentioned, how can we bridge the gap? I think that is, and I think out of this forum, we can explore this. How can we bridge the gap between the journalists and the church? And can the church play a role in helping to train journalists on reporting of church matters? But one last thing quickly. On the area of collective responsibility and the matter of credibility in stories, I think is an important area, because sometimes you listen to certain things that are coming out of certain programs and you wonder whether this individual responsibility of journalists and the credibility of information which is disseminated and doing the research on gathering the facts. And even though you don't have the facts at the time, what do you think on this particular area in terms of how is that put out there when you do not have all the facts? Can the journalist coin it in such a way that the public would know that you have not done enough research in that particular area, but you have certain information that you want to disseminate, but put it in such a way, and that is part of credibility. you put it in such a way that the public know you do not have all the facts behind what you are saying. I don't know how you want to react to this.
No, but yes, Martin is absolutely right. But there are, journalistic approaches, so to speak, to doing that, because it's very seldom that you have all the facts on any story that you're reporting. Very seldom. When you do that, it's because you have done a lot of research and perhaps investigative journalism. Okay, but there are specific cases where something breaks, right? And it has happened, but you do not have all of the information. So you say, well, look, this, according to reports, this has happened, but we have not been able to verify exactly what went down, but we will let you know, provide more information when we have. So certainly you can do that, and this is something that's being done. But I have to agree with you. Sometimes we rush to publish, and to announce things before we do sufficient research and to ascertain that the information that we're putting out is credible. So this is something that we need to consider as well and take on board.
Okay, we have another question.
Thank you, Nazarene. It's more of a comment, though, as opposed to a question. Let me say, like Martin, it's been a very interesting discussion. But sometimes when we talk, many of us, we tend to put ourselves out. Both you and team, I'm sure, Catholics. And therefore, when we, in forums like this, we sometimes forget that we're also Catholic. I'm a journalist, but I'm a Catholic. I'm a nurse, I'm a Catholic. I'm a police officer, and I'm a Catholic. And I think if we think more of that, I don't disagree with you that the bishop and the priest cannot perhaps give more information to the media. But we as individuals, we must also see ourselves as part of the church and as church. And the church is not just Father Karam and the bishop. As I said, I agree with you that they too need to speak. We just coming from Synod a few years ago, we can say and a lot of what we deliberated on in Synod, it's coming up again in Joubilee year. And this question of who should talk and what we should be talking about, I think those were areas that were deliberated on very much during the Synod process. And maybe we still have not gotten it right in terms of, how we do it. But to say that the church is not talking on social issues may not be very accurate, because as fact, just this week I was listening to BBS radio. It's today or yesterday, and they were quoting Father at some funeral service talking about the murders and young people need to be given new direction and hope and all of that stuff. And I'm saying perhaps the journalists need to do a little bit more of that. Sometimes we are invited. Even sometimes you go to a Catholic function, you cover Mass, and the priest raises some very pertinent issues on social issues, but the next day you hear nothing in the news, or there is nothing in the papers, there is nothing on social media about it. But you go to the political rally. I was just listening. Sunday, the Prime Minister was in Grafton. Father gave a homily, Father Fanso. But what you reported? Nothing about what Father Fanso said.
I reported that.
Well, I didn't hear you. I heard BBS. So I can only report on what I heard. But I didn't hear anything about what Father Fanso said. All I heard was what the Prime Minister said. So it's who we are following sometimes. But having said all that, I am also hearing a yearning for dialogue between the journalists and the church. And perhaps the activity that we're having this evening may have been the wrong activity. What we needed was let's talk session. Something like maybe a pre-breakfast, your father invites you and have some nice food, and we talk over food and drink about how the media and the church can be more effective. The journalists and the church can be more effective in reporting on the things that we want to report on. And maybe we need to take that to the next level. What we are doing here tonight, we certainly need to do a follow-up, and that could be a follow-up because a lot of our media people are not here. And to listen to the media and the media to listen to the church and determine how can we make things different? How can we bring hope to the Dominican people? Because in a situation in which we are now, we spoke about the youth, but we all have that personal and collective responsibility to bring hope and to give hope to our young people. So I'm hoping that those of you who are here tonight and those who are listening, who are journalists, media workers, can work with the church in trying to bring that hope to the Dominican people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is said that controversy sells, and is who says what that makes the news. The dog biting the man is not news, but the man biting the dog is news.
That's so true. I want to, as you said, Davis, I think there should be more communication, and we can't be everywhere in every church. But I think the church should set up some public relations, if you will, and try to get a coverage on maybe on a weekly basis of some of the vital issues that is preached in the homilies, and we could get a better sense of what is being said out there. Because to make a blanket statement that is not being said may not be fair, but I'm saying there should be a responsibility from the church itself to provide some communication to the media out there so we can do a better job at communication.
We also have yes, do we have a question or comment? No?
Just a comment. So, first of all, let me just congratulate the organizers of this forum and the enlightened panelists. But my comment is really being directed to Mr. Pelty.
Okay.
And you know it is when, I'm not saying that that is what you're doing, pointing fingers. When you point so many fingers in different directions, there's one pointing at you. And I say that to encourage the reformation of a media association that would set standards, organize training, and reach out to the sources from which you need information. Because you made some comments and they were addressed by both Father Karam and Mr. Jura. In the sense that we do have homilies and we do speak on certain issues. And from that, you can gather the discourse on social problems and the position or the thought of the church or the priest at the time and so on. So it may not have been totally fair to say that, you're not hearing from the church. I'm assuming that you go to church very often, so you can pick up one or two things. And Mr. Jura also spoke about the facilitation or the accommodation that the media personnel deserve, right? And so probably a media association might want to set standards and provide guidance and source training so that we can have a professional news network with diverse information and all of that. So that's just my comment.
Well, as it relates to the media, media association is no more. And I think I'll be blunt and say that the media in Dominica has become very politicized. So what you find is 10% pro-government and 10% pro-professional media. That's the challenge that we have right now. And I'm hoping that good sense will prevail and we will answer your call.
But I believe too that the training that we've talked about could help to resolve that, if not entirely, but to a certain extent. Because if you're a properly trained media person, journalist, you're entitled to have your political affiliation, but you as a professional, you're not supposed to allow it to be reflected in what you produce, And I think that is what has gone wrong, with us. So, or the other aspect of it is that because of one's political affiliation or sympathy, so to speak, I may not necessarily be affiliated to a party, but I sympathize, with that party or politician. I refrain from publishing, certain information about that particular party or politician. And I think a trained person, well-trained media, professional should be able, to deal with that challenge. Still support your party or your politician, but be able to report the truth accurately and objectively. And I think this is what we're lacking in this country right now.
Okay, we have another question or comment.
Yeah.
I've very much enjoyed this conversation. I would call it so. Coming from a background of having run the Catholic magazine for more than 10 years, I didn't realize all this time had passed. And although I have taken a step back from that now, but I'm very pleased with some of the comments because these are the things that we're not aware of. They trying to build a bridge between what we want said and what the media wants to say, and how do we get that across. So I think I've been taking notes on the phone. I've been taking notes. So it's something that we will take back to the communications department and maybe start from scratch and re-examine exactly how we have been doing things in the past. Obviously, we can't do things how we're doing it before it, because if it's not working, it needs to be revamped. So I'm really appreciative of the comments, and we will definitely take that back. I love all the comments here and so on. Nazarene and myself have a lot of work to do, but it is really good, to get a nice, calm perspective we can discuss and find out. I've never heard this from the media before, and I'm sure you probably haven't heard some of what we said before. So it's a really wonderful discourse this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we thank members of the audience for their comments and questions. Indeed informative. We will at this point give each member of the panel to give a closing remark. And Father Karam, we know you're not member of the panel, but would like to hear your closing thoughts, having listened and part of the whole Jubilee year. We begin with Mr. Tim Durant.
Thank you, Nazarene. Well, I too want to echo the sentiments that have been expressed about the discussion this evening. I quite enjoyed it. I was exposed to certain ideas that I had not myself thought of before. And I think what it has done is opened up the possibility for more interaction, greater interaction between the media and the church. And I am pretty sure that Vanessa is going to take that up to ensure, because one of the things I think that needs to happen is there has to be the media has to take initiatives. Okay, that's what we do, or what we're supposed to be doing, to take initiatives to report the news. But you find, and from my experience, that organizations that have well-established communication units, they get more of their information out in the media, right, than others. So if the church can do that and set up in a way that makes that information available and provide the opportunity for exploration and expansion of that information, so that you send me a press release, because the way it works, you send me a press release and I may choose to run it as is, verbatim, but I don't have to do that as a news person. I can look at the press release and say, hey, this thing needs development, this thing needs clarification, and I need to talk to somebody about it. So if that sort of, relationship can be developed, between the media and the church, when next we come back here for another such discussion, we'll be saying different things. Okay, so that's what I'd like to say, and just, reiterate my position, my view that this has been a very enlightening, interesting discussion. And thank you for inviting me.
Matt Pelletier, if you take the microphone.
Based on the discussion tonight, I will say there is hope. And I'm hoping that the leaders of the church can, of course, take on some of the advice that happened tonight, that took place tonight, because church news plays a vital role in keeping members informed, strengthening community, and supporting the church's mission by fostering a sense of belonging, providing a platform for ministry, and encouraging spiritual growth. On that note, I say thank you.
Pass the microphone to Father Karam, please.
So I would like to just express my own gratitude to Mr. Duran and Mr. Pelletier for their time and their expertise, sharing that with us tonight, and helping to provide a provocative and hopefully very, as well as you have said, interesting conversation. And indeed, this is we can see this as a beginning, as a start to a more interactive and relationship between the media and the church. And hopefully as we move forward, we can do more to help to facilitate one another and to get our people to have a full sense of the mission of the church and the gospel that we preach.
Let me just add one more comment before we go. I will encourage, to start it off, that on a weekly basis, Vanessa and Nazarene, that we have a conversation with one particular priest every week, so we can talk to the issues of the day. Okay? Not just Father Karam, but everybody.
Well, indeed, this was a lively discussion. It took a turn that I did not anticipate based on the focus, but this is healthy. And also, we thought of one panel discussion, and we see several in the making, so work has just begun. It was indeed a pleasure being your moderator. I first want to thank Father Nigel Karam, and he's the chair of the 2025 Jubilee Committee. And again, we invite everybody to pay attention and look out for the events coming up on the Jubilee calendar. We're in the Jubilee year, thus we're having the Jubilee for journalists. Members of the panel, Mr. Pelletier and Mr. Durand, the various media houses who helped promote this panel discussion, members of the 2025 Jubilee Committee, we see your co-chair, Mr. Litan, those who joined us in person and on social media, and members of our Marketing and Communications Committee who put this panel discussion together. A lot has come out from this discussion. The resuscitation of MWAD. Earlier on somebody asked and I couldn't say. Of course, the continued effort to build our communications unit within the diocese and more dialogue. We hope that, as everyone else has said, it's just the start, and very soon we'll be convening again. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you to those of you who were viewing and listening via Dominican News Online, and thank you to DNO, Mr. Durand, for agreeing to stream this panel discussion. Thank you to Prevo Cinemall, who has provided us with some refreshments. So we thank you again, and as we end, we invite you to join us for a drink or two.
Thank you.
Thank you again.